Free energy. Quote, if these new energy technologies were to be set free worldwide, the change would be profound. It would affect everybody. It would be applicable everywhere. These technologies are absolutely the most important thing that has happened in the history of the world. End quote. Dr. Brian O'Leary, PhD in astronomy, UC Berkeley, NASA astronaut, adjunct lecturer at Princeton, Caltech, Cornell, and an expert on breakthrough energy technologies. Everyone seems to be caught up in a battle or struggle for energy. We eat energy bars to keep apace. People can feel low or high energy or sense bad or good energy in others. Our energy costs, especially for transportation, continue to weigh heavily on most American budgets. Our conflicts with the people of the Middle East are mostly over energy, our desire to acquire theirs. And as we shall see now, our quest to introduce free energy is one of the major challenges for the future of this world. The elite controllers referred to throughout this book have a history of obstructing anything that threatens their own power structure, including revolutionary new energy technologies. Today, the hydrocarbon and nuclear lobbies represent a multi-trillion-dollar per year industry. Those with financial interests in the current global petrochemical industry are literally suppressing the very information and solutions we need to restore our planet to health. Our need for radical energy solutions could not be more urgent. The current model of burning oil, coal, and gas for our energy needs is woefully outdated. Even nuclear energy is not a sustainable or a dependable clean energy source for our future. In choosing an energy path, and it is a choice, we must consider all the living people, animals, plants, and general health of the planet, all of which are affected. Burning oil and coal for energy are smokestack relics of the 19th century, the antiquated top hat mentality with no regard for the environment. Pollution parasites. Human beings, in the way we pollute without regard to other living organisms, have become a planetary parasite, tainting nearly every ecosystem on Earth with our destructive and wasteful ways. There must be a better choice. We've put a man on the moon, developed the microchip, and we can communicate and travel globally. Consider the concept of an over-unity device, where you put a little energy in to get the engine started, and then it produces a greater output. Few people are aware that since the 19th century, over-unity devices have been introduced with much fanfare and then have quickly disappeared. But why? Is the 19th century invention of an internal combustion engine which runs on gasoline the best we can do for personal transportation? Or can the manufacture and marketing of an over-unity device be the downfall of the largest corporations on the planet? It must be remembered that burning hydrocarbons equals making lots of money, and making big money means influence and control. Scientists as far back as Nikola Tesla in the early 1900s have been developing alternative ways to access electricity without combustion. Tesla's breakthrough inventions and patents, those not destroyed or suppressed, have changed the face of energy technologies in the 20th century. Yet his name and work have been absent in science textbooks, and the reason will soon become clear as the reader absorbs the facts and checks reliable internet sources. Tesla discovered the AC current that is used all over the world today. That's alternating current. He also developed the ability to transmit electrical energy through the air, like radio waves, where the power could be received by the end user with an antenna. He built the Wardenclyffe Tower to demonstrate this capability to the world, and famously stated, quote, "All peoples everywhere should have free energy sources. Electric power is everywhere present in unlimited quantities and can drive the world's machinery without the need for coal, oil, or gas," end quote. Nikola Tesla was not motivated by the desire for status or wealth. He wanted to give the world free energy. But right before his wireless energy broadcast demonstration, banker J.P. Morgan ceased further funding and the project was terminated. See, Morgan owned the copper mines and was making a fortune from the copper wire used to conduct electricity. Tesla's inventions would have made those copper wires obsolete. It would have upset the business model of Morgan's rich friends in the petroleum industry. If we are to implement free energy in the tradition of Nikola Tesla, then we need to replicate not only his science, but his humanity. Motives for suppression. There is clearly a technology block that continues to choke the planet in order to control all its inhabitants. Big oil and special interests permeate all branches of government, and many private and public agencies are certainly to blame. Since 1951, the US government has restricted the release of over 5,000 known energy technology patents that have the potential to end many of today's greatest challenges. For example, in 1955, a car that runs only on non-polluting hydrogen was shown to the world by completing 110 laps at the Indianapolis 500 racetrack. The plans were bought by Gulf Western Oil and never seen nor heard from about again. While the non-polluting aspects of hydrogen are encouraging, the question remains how to create the energy to generate the energy. A number of inventions, some actually patented, have made great strides towards solving this problem. However, it would appear there are powerful individuals in a compartmentalized area of the US government, together with big oil itself, which retain and control all of the patents and breakthrough free energy technologies. But they continue to suppress this vital information intentionally and intimidate those who wish to share it because it is seen as a threat to their hegemonic empire. Remember the saying, quote, "What is good for General Motors is good for America, and what is good for America is good for General Motors," end quote. It is quite possible that various powerful individuals believe this maxim. Various governmental agencies, or rather key individuals within these organizations, view free energy technologies as a threat. Conscious or not, the underlying threat and motivation for suppression appears to be the fear of loss of professional identity, status, livelihood for those dependent on academic support, and yes, greed and control for those at the top of the pyramid. After all, free energy is exactly what it is, free, which does not turn a profit, make a meter tick, or generate any tax revenue. The U.S. Patent Office has quietly seized thousands of alternative energy inventions over the decades and have defended this action in the name of national security. Inventors such as John Hutchinson, Adam Trombley, Thomas Bearden, and John Bedini each have invented similar new energy technologies which have the potential to free us of oil dependency and open up access for everyone to have universally abundant energy source. But the startling fact is that their labs have been raided and their devices destroyed. Claiming national security issues, the U.S. Patent Office has confiscated thousands of alternative energy devices during the application process for patents. If the free energy inventors persist, one of the warnings commonly given is, quote, cease and desist your operations. We're terminating your project due to the threat it poses to the international monetary system, end quote. If free energy were just a hoax, why would the government take such harsh measures to confiscate plans and equipment? If an inventor cannot be bought, the US government's response to any hint of success from free energy inventors has been to raid their labs with an armed FBI or SWAT team, confiscate their equipment, intimidate the inventor, and issue a gag order. They do this because the stakes are very high and the government enjoys huge revenues from taxing the generation of power. As Stephen Greer of the Disclosure Project points out, quote, this information coming out would completely change geopolitical power more than anything in human history, end quote. Free energy inventor Adam Trombley maintains that one of the top reasons why the UFO phenomenon is suppressed is because people would clamor to know what drives these crafts, and it would force disclosure of free energy. If we could eliminate the very powerful special interest blocks on free energy, Trombley states, quote, we would have universal abundance, end quote. Oil is not what you think. When the Nazis took power, Germany had resolved to develop enough synthetic oil to wage war successfully, even without abundant national oil reserves. At the end of World War II, US intelligence agents confiscated thousands of German documents on what was known as the Fischer-Tropsch process, a series of equations developed by German chemists that unlocked the secret of how oil was formed. For decades, these confiscated Nazi documents remained largely ignored in the United States, where petrogeologists and petrochemists were convinced that oil was a fossil fuel created long ago by decayed biological debris. The theory that oil is a fossil fuel derived from decaying ancient forests and dead dinosaurs is now challenged on two fronts. Following the war, Stalin demanded his petrogeologists simply dig deeper. In 1970, the Russians started drilling an exploration well called Kola SG3. It finally reached a staggering world record depth of 12,260 meters. That's 40,230 feet. Since then, the Russian oil company Yukos has drilled over 310 successful super deep oil wells and put them into production. The Russian reserves discovered at greater depths and other Siberian wells, which at first appeared to be depleted but then somehow became refilled, has propelled Russia to be the world's top oil producer. A single oil field in Siberia today challenges Saudi Arabia for the lead in oil production and global exploration. In 2008, a study published in Science magazine presented new evidence supporting the abiotic theory for the origin of oil, which postulates that oil is a natural product generated constantly from deep within the earth. The abiotic theory of the origin of oil directly challenges the conventional scientific theory that hydrocarbons are organic in nature, created by the deterioration of biological material deposited millions of years ago in sedimentary rock and converted to hydrocarbons under intense heat and pressure. Clearly, big US oil companies have no financial interest in disclosing to the American people that oil is simply a natural product made on a continual basis deep within the earth. Rather, if there were only so many fossils in geological time as is currently accepted, there could only be so much oil. Big oil could then charge much more for a perceived finite, rapidly disappearing resource than for a natural, renewable, and probably inexhaustible one. However, not only can oil be produced synthetically, once oil is understood as an abundantly available resource, there is no reason for hydrocarbon fuels to indefinitely remain for sale by big oil and according to their prices. And therefore, and therein is the threat to their dominant position in the global economy. The concept of peak oil is a scam meant only to raise the price and profitability of hydrocarbon products. Energy control is world control. For over 100 years, since the time of Nikola Tesla, hundreds of new energy researchers have been suppressed by powerful interests in government, industry, science, and the media. Abner Dubel was an American mechanical engineer who built and sold steam-powered automobiles. Dubel worked in his native America and also in New Zealand, Great Britain, and Germany in the 1920s and 1930s. Abner Dubel's work, if not actually suppressed, was certainly thwarted by vested interests, namely the major international oil companies and cartels and giant car companies who manufactured internal combustion powered vehicles. The electric car has also been subject to suppression, and it has been around even longer than the gasoline car. Electric cars were first being manufactured and sold before the advent of the internal combustion engine. Thomas Edison used to drive about town in his 1914 electric car. It should be very little mystery who killed these alternatives to fossil fuel driven vehicles. Alternative energy scientist Colonel Thomas Bearden has this to say about free energy suppression. Quote, "The people of the world need to know that the oil companies have become the enemies of mankind. They are withholding and suppressing technologies which could save the planet and eliminate poverty and suffering." End quote. Bearden does not mince words when he clearly calls out the perpetrators and their world control agenda. He continues, quote, "As long as we allow there to be a secret government, this will continue to be so. Those who toil in basements and garages to bring forth energy from the vacuum, in spite of death threats and assassinations, are the true heroes of this age." End quote. Alternative energy scientist Colonel Thomas Bearden had this to say about free energy suppression. Quote, "The people of the world need to know that the oil companies have become the enemies of mankind. They are withholding and suppressing technologies which could save the planet and eliminate poverty and suffering." End quote. Bearden does not mince words when he clearly calls out the perpetrators and their world control agenda. He continues, quote, "As long as we allow there to be a secret government, this will continue to be so. Those who toil in basements and garages to bring forth energy from the vacuum in spite of death threats and assassinations are the true heroes of this age." End quote. Another free energy device inventor, Adam Trombley, said, quote, "There is limitless and practically useful energy anywhere you stand or sit. We can feel it and we can be it. We can tap into it with real technologies. We can light our homes and drive our quiet, clean vehicles as the wounds of our tortured earth are healed forever. Let's take back our planet. Let's start now." End quote. According to the free energy inventors, we can develop and make available new energy devices with only modest investments. Once again, the entire phenomenon of extraterrestrial beings is a critical factor in this global energy problem and its solutions. If even a portion of the millions of UFO sightings worldwide are credible, it is clear that they can travel and communicate. Remember the crop circles, for example, with advanced technologies? There must be another method of extracting energy from the universe which neither pollutes nor costs anything. Many scientists who have been forced underground say yes, there is another method. It is called zero-point energy or free energy, and it uses the process of cold fusion, which does not produce any harmful or polluting byproducts. Such a scientific discovery would certainly shake up the status quo and thus render big oil soon obsolete. In the eyes of these conglomerates, this cannot be allowed to happen. Since oil companies are among the largest corporations on the planet, it has been far easier, in their view, for them to buy out such companies, suppress the technology, and hire really good lobbyists and PR firms to keep their energy myth alive. The strategy has been to make campaign contributions to the president and members of Congress who steer energy policies behind closed doors. For decades, big business, especially big oil and its thousands of derivative companies, have cultivated independent ties to top big government officials. Each believes it needs the other, and this allows big oil to operate unimpeded and even gives them massive tax breaks. Such is the motivation behind energy secrecy. Free energy disinformation. The spin about free energy, largely perpetuated by handlers of the mass media, is that it simply cannot exist. It is a myth. It would seem to violate existing scientific laws. It is so advanced that its use is far in the future. Thus, we must only look backwards to what already exists to keep civilization chugging along. Yet the biggest myth of all is that we can trust governments, big oil, or the marketplace to support the necessary research and development to get us out of our current dilemma. Consider a clever and scientific disinformation story. We've all heard the claims of perpetual motion engine falsehoods. It is also the most common way to bash free energy devices. A repeating claim and an invented target is a car that runs on nothing but water. The car, it is claimed, has an energy generator that extracts hydrogen from water that is poured into the car's tank. No gasoline, no battery recharging, and no emissions. Hard to believe? It is notable that the critics will refute the idea of producing a water car because the energy to create hydrogen from water is very inefficient. A water-fueled car is a hypothetical automobile that derives its energy directly from water. In the end, where does that energy generator get its energy? Water-fueled cars have been the subject of numerous international patents, newspaper and popular science magazine articles, local television news coverage, and claims on the internet. Some proposals for these devices have been found to be incorrect, and some were found to be tied to investment frauds. These vehicles may be claimed by their inventor to produce fuel from water on board with no other energy input, or may be a hybrid of sorts, deriving energy from both water and a conventional source, such as gasoline. Therefore, any claim of vehicles with extract chemical potential energy directly from water is media-planted disinformation to muddy the waters. After all, water is fully oxidized hydrogen. Hydrogen itself is a high-energy, flammable substance, but its useful energy is released when water is formed. We all know water cannot burn. The process of electrolysis can split water into hydrogen and oxygen, but it takes as much energy to take apart a water molecule as is released when hydrogen is oxidized to form water. With this process, some energy would be lost in converting water to hydrogen, thus disqualifying the motor from being a free energy device. In addition, by then burning the hydrogen, some heat would also be produced in the conversions. Releasing chemical energy from water would therefore violate the first and second laws of thermodynamics. The second law of thermodynamics acknowledges that a torus is not a closed or isolated system. It is open to the rest of the universe, as are galaxies, solar systems, and the atoms that provide the electricity in our very own bodies. None of these are plugged into a wall socket. They all run off the infinite torque of the universe that is turning every system into existence. What if there were devices that could tap into this system, like free air? It is available everywhere for anyone. Energy is also endlessly available without burning or exploding anything. The powers that were will not allow a new energy revolution. They are masters at deception, able to create confusion within any scientific debate, not only about free energy, but in their full-out assault on climate science. Solutions to the energy crisis already exist, but they are systematically suppressed. These information blocks must be removed. In their place, we need new energy systems which are earth-oriented, visionary, and possible. Cold fusion controversy. Cold fusion hit the world stage in 1989 with the announcement of the experiments of respected electrochemists Martin Fleischmann and Stanley Pons. The pair reported anomalous heat production, or excess heat, of a magnitude they asserted would defy explanation, except in terms of a nuclear process. Although decried as non-reproducible in the scientific community, it was revealed that the palladium was defective in subsequent experiments. And this is because all samples came from the same tainted supplier. Beginning to seem suspicious? The pair was forced to release their findings prematurely because another researcher raised a clamor. In order to protect their patent, they announced their findings earlier than they wished, but their earlier findings turned world perception against them for misguided reasons. Fleischmann and Pons were labeled frauds and dismissed from the scientific community. The ability of palladium to absorb hydrogen was recognized as early as the 19th century, so it was not any kind of big unknown. Over the years, the experiments of Fleischmann and Pons have indeed been replicated, but with all the bad press surrounding the term cold fusion, it is now renamed low energy nuclear reaction, lattice assisted nuclear reaction, or chemically assisted nuclear reaction, to avoid the negative connotations associated with the original name. A small community of researchers continues to investigate cold fusion, claiming to replicate Fleischmann and Pons' results, including nuclear reaction byproducts. Cold fusion, or a nuclear event, can create 25 times the heat of the energy put in, with no radioactivity. The process uses palladium in a form of hydrogen called deuterium found in seawater. At the atomic level, palladium looks like a lattice. Its electrical charge drawing in deuterium and creates heat. This provides an electric current wrapped in insulation to a storage device. A cold fusion story on 60 Minutes has debunked the idea that free energy research is usually pegged as a pseudoscience. It is no longer regarded as a misguided attempt at a perpetual motion device, long derided by the conservative scientific community. This is encouraging progress towards accurate reporting. Another encouraging event was the Cold Fusion Colloquium held at MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts, June 11th and 12th, 2011, which allowed scientists to independently demonstrate their lattice-assisted nuclear reaction devices. 24 scientists discussed their experimental evidence, proving that test tube nuclear fusion is a real effect. Hundreds of other scientists have replicated cold fusion experiments. It seems that changing the mass perception of cold fusion is much harder than replicating the experiments of Fleischmann and Pons, but progress is being made. The rise and fall of Tesla technology. While scientists in the early 19th century produced rapid developments in electrical science, the late 19th century witnessed the greatest progress in electrical engineering. Through such people as Nikola Tesla, Thomas Edison, George Westinghouse, Ernest Warner von Siemens, Alexander Graham Bell, and Lord Kelvin, electricity was turned from a scientific curiosity into an essential tool for modern life, becoming a driving force behind a second industrial revolution. Nikola Tesla, 1856 to 1943, was a physicist and electrical engineer who changed the world with the invention of the alternating electric current, making the universal transmission and distribution of electricity possible. He invented the electric motor, the induction motor, the Tesla turbine, fluorescent and neon lights, radio transmission, wireless communications, wireless electricity transfer, a remote-controlled boat, robotics, and Tesla's oscillator. He also discovered rotating magnetic fields, invented the electric car, vertical takeoff aircraft, which appears to resemble an ion-propelled aircraft or modern stealth bombers, bifiller coil, HARP military weather modification, particle beam weapons, and death ray guns. All this advanced science came from one individual. Tesla's other discoveries also led to the invention of radio, television, radar, X-rays, the spark plug, and the wireless transmission of free energy. Tesla's registered over 700 patents worldwide. His vision included exploration of teleforce, telegeodynamics, electrogravitics, terrestrial stationary waves, solar energy, and harnessing the power of the sea. At the very least, his undeveloped inventions, especially those regarding the wireless transmission of free energy, need to be re-examined. Given this array of groundbreaking inventions, Tesla is regarded by many as the greatest inventor of all time. Yet, few have even heard of him. This is a stark example of widespread and effective suppression. If the moneyed interests cannot buy out a patent holder, they will systematically harass him and destroy his credibility. Murder is not out of the question. J.P. Morgan was a shill for the 19th century energy cabal, and he stole a number of Tesla's inventions and technologies. Tesla had submitted 1,800 patents to the U.S. Patent Office, yet for all his work, there is only one public statue of Nikola Tesla in the USA, and it is located at the hydroelectric dam he developed in Niagara Falls, New York. J.P. Morgan originally funded Tesla because he needed his work for a telegraph design, among other things. When Tesla's understudy Marconi took the idea and claimed to invent the telegraph independently, that was enough for J.P. Morgan to demolish Tesla's business and reputation. Tesla wanted to give us an antenna system that would use the Earth's energy grid to heat homes and run cars from an inexhaustible source. Despite his lab being mysteriously burned down in 1895, he persisted. Prior to the completion of his work on the free energy generator and prior to any patenting, all of his equipment, models, and inventions were destroyed. Nevertheless, he created a wireless electricity transfer system in 1902 at Colorado Springs, Colorado. He was going to offer it to the world wirelessly so that all people needed was an antenna in their yard for access. Wireless energy could be transferred as easily as cell phones, a radio signal, or television is today. Finally, having obtained dozens and dozens of patents for his work, he experienced several periods of success, though he struggled to finance the Wardenclyffe project on Long Island, New York. Shrouded in secrecy, the intentions of this project were unclear to the public. However, desperate for money to continue the project, Tesla felt he must reveal the potential for the vast expansion of electricity to J.P. Morgan in order to secure further financing. Margaret Cheney, author of Tesla, Man Out of Time, estimates that Tesla had misjudged Morgan. Quote, "The prospect of beaming electricity to penniless Zulus or pygmies," she wrote, quote, "left the financier apathetic about the project," end quote. When asked where the meter was, Tesla said there was none. It was free energy for the people. Consequently, this project, among others, was discontinued by his financier, J.P. Morgan, and never came to fruition. Besides discrediting or downplaying Tesla technology, the black operations of the US government have been studying free energy devices since at least the late 1940s, when the first extraterrestrial spacecrafts were recovered and back engineered. As a result, they have successfully developed free energy technology, but will not release the information to the public. This blackout of vital energy technology has many casualties in its wake, including Eugene Malov, who was mysteriously beaten to death in 2004, the day before he was to make a free energy announcement on a nationally syndicated radio program. Despite being America's greatest inventor, Nikola Tesla was ostracized and died penniless simply for trying to implement his vision of unlimited energy for everyone. Shortly before his death in 1943, he affirmed his humanitarian vision. Quote, "Out of this war, the greatest since the beginning of history, a new world must be born, a world that would justify the sacrifices offered by humanity. This new world must be a world in which there shall be no exploitation of the weak by the strong, of the good by the evil, where there will be no humiliation of the poor by the violence of the rich, where the products of the intellect, science, and art will serve society for the betterment and the beautification of life." Wonderful quote by Tesla right before his death in 1943, where he affirmed his humanitarian vision. Quote, "Out of this war, the greatest since the beginning of history, a new world must be born, a world that would justify the sacrifices offered by humanity. This new world must be a world in which there shall be no exploitation of the weak by the strong, of the good by the evil, where there will be no humiliation of the poor by the violence of the rich, where the products of intellect, science, and art will serve society for the betterment and the beautification of life, not the individuals for achieving wealth. This new world shall not be a world of the downtrodden and humiliated, but of free men and free nations, equal in dignity and respect for mankind." End quote. Is it any wonder the energy cabal considered Nikola Tesla an enemy? The wireless transmissions of energy. Originally revered in top scientific circles and once considered one of the most famous people on the planet, Dr. Nikola Tesla is practically written out of our scientific and educational textbooks. Where did he discover that caused his fall from grace? In fact, his virtual disappearance from the official history of science. Maybe Tesla's own words give a clue. Quote, "The transmission of power without wires is not a theory or a mere possibility as it appears to most people, but a fact demonstrated by me in experiments which have extended for years. Nor did the idea present itself to me all of a sudden, but was a result of a very slow and gradual development and a logical consequence of my investigations, which were earnestly undertaken in 1893 when I gave the world my first outline of my system of broadcasting wireless energy for all purposes. The transmission of energy through a single conductor without return having been found practicable, it occurred to me that possibly even that one wire might be dispensed with the earth and used to convey the energy from the transmitter to the receiver." End quote. Tesla's wireless system in all its essential features is already used throughout the world in wireless cell phone transmissions or for conveying data intelligence such as Wi-Fi. But his pioneer efforts in the field of wirelessly transmitting electricity are still largely misunderstood. Quoting Tesla again, "My efforts to transmit large amounts of power through the atmosphere resulted in the development of an invention of great promise, which has since been called the death ray and attributed to Dr. Grinnell Matthews, an ingenious and skillful English electrician. The underlying idea was to render the air conducting by suitable ionizing radiations and to convey high tension currents along the path of the rays. Experiments conducted on a large scale showed that with pressures of many millions of volts, virtually unlimited quantities of energy can be projected to a small distance of a few hundred feet, which might be satisfactory if the process were more economical and the apparatus less expensive. Since that time, I have made important improvements and discovered a new principle which can be successfully applied without difficulty for various purposes in peace and war, end quote. Tesla discovered that energy travels chiefly along an orthodromic line, which is the shortest distance between 2 points at the surface of the globe. It reaches the receiver without the slightest dispersion, so that the greatest amount of energy is collected. He has thus provided a perfect means for transmitting power in any desired direction, for far more economically and without any such qualitative and quantitative limitations as the use of reflectors would necessarily involve. Tesla's system is based entirely on resonance. The foundation for its use was laid down by Sir William Crookes, who in 1876 discovered that a highly heated conductor emits electrified particles. In 1882, a young French electrician named Fischer-Tropsch observed that a current issues from the filament of an incandescent lamp, and he made careful measurements with specially prepared bulbs. Quote, nature has stored up in the universe infinite energy. The eternal recipient and transmitter of this energy is the ether, end quote, observed Tesla in 1891. He continued, quote, of all forms of nature's energy, which is ever and ever changing and moving, like a soul animates the inner universe, electricity and magnetism are perhaps the most fascinating, end quote. He asked the question and then gives the answer, quote, what is electricity and what is magnetism? All matter comes from a primary substance, the akasha, or luminiferous ether, end quote. He sensed that the universe was composed of a symphony of alternating currents with the harmonies played on a vast range of octaves. To explore the whole range of electrical vibrations would bring him closer to an understanding of the cosmic symphony. Tesla understood that the cosmic symphony is resonance. Nothing exists in the universe that does not have harmonic vibration. As we know today, there is energy and vibrations all around us. Even matter is a potential form of energy. Tesla was right when he observed that free energy could be extracted by exciting the electrons in a steady state, which can absorb and drive the electrons to shed even more energy. They will kill you. The same banker, J.P. Morgan, who prohibited Nikola Tesla from making abundant energy available wirelessly, was also influential in suppressing key scientific truths about how energy works. In the early 20th century, he used his financial influence on educational policy to delete from textbooks the knowledge which can lead to creating such devices. According to free energy inventor Tom Bearden, author of Energy from the Vacuum, quote, J.P. Morgan got Lorenz to cripple the Heaviside equations so that the new electrical engineering concepts being taught in the universities would not ever contain free energy and over-unity systems. This deliberate mutation and crippling of electrical engineering is the real and single cause of our dependence on oil and of much of the pollution of our biosphere. The High Cabal, Churchill's name for the secret consortium of elite families and organizations we loosely refer to as the control groups, has been ruthlessly suppressing free energy inventors for a century, including by direct assassination. Having personally survived several such assassination attempts, I have experienced what I'm speaking of, end quote. The notion of clean, inexpensive energy for all, however, is a threat to those who want to squeeze every last dollar out of hydrocarbon fuels, and especially those who would use the control of energy to dictate people's lives. Shortly before his death in 1943, Tesla had submitted a proposal to the Roosevelt administration to counter the damaging potential of fission-based nuclear energy development. He claimed in his proposal to the president that he knew of a method by which we could get all the energy we could ever use from the space that surrounds us. A meeting was scheduled with FDR as a result of this proposal, but the meeting never occurred. Tesla was found dead in his New York apartment. The official report attributed his death to natural causes, but others were not satisfied with this version and suspected foul play. Along with the questionable death of Nikola Tesla, others who have spoken publicly about free energy have died under suspicious circumstances. Dr. Eugene F. Malov, the Harvard and MIT trained scientist and engineer who edited Infinite Energy magazine, was about to appear with author David Wilcock on Coast to Coast Radio in May 2004 to announce a breakthrough in free energy. The day before his announcement, he was mysteriously bludgeoned to death. Tesla's world system. Nikola Tesla knew his plan to provide wireless technology transmission to all people of the world was going to flourish. In his mind, it was really just a matter of funding. The fundamental difference between the broadcasting system he expected to inaugurate and what had been in place is that the current transmitter emits energy in all directions, while in the system he devised, only force is conveyed to all points of the earth. The energy itself is traveling in definite, predetermined paths. Tesla's world system was designed with novel transmitters of great effectiveness and receivers of elementary simplicity. In his apparatus, the isochronism is so perfect and the attunement sharp to such a degree that in the transmission of speech, pictures, or similar operations, the frequency or wavelength is varied only through a minute range which need not be more than 1/100th of 1% if desired. Static and all other interferences are completely eliminated, and the service is unaffected by weather and seasonal or diurnal changes of any kind. Tesla also noted in the late 19th century that, quote, the system lends itself particularly to world wireless telephony and telegraphy, end quote. The wireless transmission of free energy around the world had many other practical uses. Tesla noted, quote, one of the most important uses of wireless energy will be undoubtedly for the propulsion of flying machines, to which power can be readily supplied without ground connection. For Although the flow of the currents is confined to the Earth, an electromagnetic field is created in the atmosphere surrounding it. If conductors of circuits accurately attuned and properly positioned are carried by the plane, energy is drawn into these circuits much the same way as a fluid will pass through a hole created in the container. With an industrial plant of great capacity, sufficient power can be derived in this manner to propel any kind of aerial machine. This I always considered as the best and permanent solution of the problems of flight. No fuel of any kind will be required, as the propulsion will be accomplished by light electric motors operated at a great speed." End quote. Inventor John Bandini, working with Tesla's theories of radiant energy decades ago, and has produced an assortment of battery charging devices that generate more energy than it takes for them to run. Devices by John Bandini in the field of radiant energy were reported to operate at over 800% efficiency, according to the American National News Service. This document from 1984 reports Bandini's initial intentions to market such devices. He announced that he was going to start offering them at low cost. Soon after that, he was attacked in his lab and warned not to produce the machines. For his own safety, he had to discontinue marketing his free energy devices. Similarly, Canadian inventor John Hutchinson not only created free energy batteries, but also used Tesla's theories to counter gravity, to make objects float weightlessly. This could revolutionize the field of propulsion. His lab was raided and equipment was taken by police and government officials in 1978, 1989, and again in 2000. Fast forward to the dilemma of the early 21st century. Oil, coal, gasoline, and nuclear energy remain the dominant paradigm for our energy solutions. Tesla knew that special interests would continue to suppress his technology, but one day it would get another look. Quote, "Sooner or later, my power system will have to be adopted in its entirety. And so far as I am concerned, it is now as good as done. If I were ever assailed by doubt of ultimate success, I would dismiss it by remembering the words of that great philosopher, Lord Kelvin, who, after witnessing some of my experiments, said to me with tears in his eyes, quote, 'I am sure you will do it,' end quote." Free energy from the sun. The solar to electric conversion of energy, used and known throughout the world today as the photovoltaic effect, is no more than the capture of light, a stream of particles called photons. Some photons dislodge some electrons off the silicon atom at an energy conversion point, freeing electrons which are captured by the conducting grid and fed into a battery for later use, or immediately used as controlled energy. That infinite source of free electrons is the major source of natural earth energy, from its obvious manifestation in lightning bolts to its unseen but measurable vastness in the ionosphere. Modern solar collectors have to overcome current inefficiencies, but future improvements can make photovoltaics much more efficient and practical. The ionosphere and the sun shining on the earth provide literally infinite charging. The sun is made of plasma and no other matter can get so hot. Plasma responds to magnetism. It thus can be molded and shaped and tied to a magnetic field. The natural photovoltaic effect produces limitless, immeasurable amounts of free electrons. This free and natural electricity is more than we can ever use without upsetting the balance of nature. The Earth's magnetic field can also be used to harvest electricity. Magnetic propulsion, anti-gravity, and unlimited power generation are the applications. If free energy discoveries prove valid, it will be necessary to re-examine the implications of the second law of thermodynamics, which says energy can be neither created nor destroyed. If the magnet machines pump energy from a heretofore unrecognized background field of energy, then they do not create energy, they just convert it. Bad energy and good energy. Let's be very clear. Supplying the world with energy is the biggest and most profitable of all business models. The proven oil, natural gas, and global coal reserves are worth over $200 trillion. Let's break it down. As of October 2011, crude oil cost $95 a barrel, and there were approximately 1.2 trillion barrels of oil reserves on Earth. This equals roughly 114 trillion still untapped. Coal costs $80 per ton, and there were approximately 500 billion tons of coal reserves on Earth. This equals roughly 40 trillion. Natural gas costs $400 per ton, and there were approximately 155 billion tons of natural gas reserves on Earth. This equals roughly $62 trillion. The total value of these energy reserves is $216 trillion. The bulk of energy we use now is obviously unsustainable and is compromising the planet's health through wars of conquest, pollution, and irreversible civilization-destroying climate change. Energy non-solutions are all hydrocarbons, nuclear, wind, biofuels, and the current models of hydrogen and solar energy. Burning oil, coal, and natural gas are highly flawed energy solutions. Nuclear power is expensive and extremely unsafe. Just look at the huge exclusion zones surrounding Chernobyl in the former Soviet Union, countries of Ukraine and Belarus, and more recently, the disaster in Fukushima, Japan. The dangers of using nuclear power are tragically graphic. Furthermore, there is no safe storage for nuclear waste. While hydrogen burns clean, as a fuel, it requires more energy to produce that can be obtained for usage. Only if we can manipulate the chemical nature of the hydrogen molecule can we have a form of overunity or free energy. Solar and wind solutions suffer from high costs and expensive materials and require precious land use, making them inefficient. Wind energy turbines and fans also kill huge numbers of birds in flight. Biofuel is just another way of burning carbon. An enormous infrastructure is required for biofuels, which compete with agricultural land needed to grow food for a hungry world population. The new energy technologies include vacuum or zero-point energy, ZPE, low temperature, non-radioactive nuclear reactions like cold fusion, advanced hydrogen and water technologies. And we should always keep the door open to other potential surprises. The ZPE are electromagnetic devices that, through the use of vibrating electrons, either through the rotary motion of spinning electromagnets or the vibrations of electrons within a solid-state device, can tap the enormous energy potential of the etheric field or vacuum. Advanced hydrogen and water technologies still in development are special forms that can produce more energy than is needed to start the machine running. Zero-point energy. There is energy everywhere in the quantum state yet to be harvested. The astronomy and cosmology sciences have observed that at least 2/3 of the total universe is comprised of an invisible type of energy, about which little is known or only slightly more than the fact that it exists. One cannot see this type of energy, thus it has been given the name dark energy. The name does not compare with or connote dark or some miraculous paranormal forces. It simply points out that this energy is out of view, just like one cannot see anything in the darkness. The name also indicates that we have little knowledge of its nature or origin. This energy is sometimes referred to as space energy or vacuum energy because it is a property of mere space and is thus a vacuum. If classical physics is right, this energy is everywhere. The engineering goal is to make zero-point energy visible and manifest it in the laboratory, leading to an energy harvest for all of humankind's use. That would convert the classical physics dark energy into mechanical energy, thus proving this aspect of the classical theory. Another portion of this energy is quantum mechanical zero-point energy, because it is supposed that it originates from quantum mechanical zero-point oscillations. Through these oscillations are rather abstract, they are well known within quantum mechanics and have been known for several decades. Both motor run and motionless devices share commonalities. The device can establish or entrain a flow to the ZPE field using high-frequency electromagnetic fields. With the ZPE entrained by the electric current, the current is suddenly stopped with a precise timing device. When the electron flow suddenly stops, a radiant energy event then occurs, which releases a pulse of energy far in excess of the original current flow. The pulse is captured to some degree by a transducer that converts the radiant energy back to a usable form and presumably into the grid for wider distribution. Tom Bearden made public the announcement of a motionless electromagnetic generator, or MEG, in 2002. His patent was an oscillating magnetic field to entrain the ZPE with no moving parts. Another low-energy device called a mighty engine MYT, massive yet tiny, has been demonstrated to use only 5% of the fuel of a normal engine. Free energy inventor Adam Trombley had been invited to demonstrate one of his generators at the United Nations and to the US Senate. But these events were constrained by the first Bush administration. Then the device itself was taken in a government raid. Former Canadian Ambassador James George details these series of events in his book, The Little Green Book on Awakening. In 1982, Adam Trombley received an international patent. That's WO 1982 002126 for his and Joseph Kahn's co-invention of the closed path homopolar machine, a ZPE device. In 1983, Trombley was issued a gag order by the US government to stop development of the closed path homopolar machine. Then, sometime before 1989, Trombley's gag order was dropped, and he developed another zero-point energy device with David Farnsworth called the piezo ringing resonance generator. In June of 1989, Trombley was scheduled to demonstrate a small version of his piezo ringing resonance generator at the UN in New York. But at the last minute, he was forced to move to a church down the street. Trombley's gag order was dropped, and he developed another zero-point energy device with David Farnsworth called the piezo ringing resonance generator. In June of 1989, Trombley was scheduled to demonstrate a small version of his piezo ringing resonance generator at the UN in New York, but at the last minute, he was forced to move to a church down the street. Afterwards, Trombley gave a speech in the Dag Hammarskjöld Auditorium at the United Nations in front of an international audience. A few days later, Trombley was scheduled to demonstrate the same device at the U.S. Senate Banking and Finance Committee in Washington, D.C. Only Senator Carl Levin and a handful of staff were in attendance because the senior Bush administration called hundreds of senators, congressional representatives, and their staff members for an off-the-cuff discussion of the Clean Air Act at the exact time as Trombley's demonstration. Thus, the first Bush administration successfully diverted attention away from the technology in an effort to censor Trombley. Magnetic energy devices. Another portion of this energy is the quantum mechanical zero-point energy, because it is supposed that it originates from quantum mechanical zero-point oscillations. Though these oscillations are rather abstract, they are well known within quantum mechanics and have been for several decades. Both motor-run and motionless devices share commonalities. The device can establish or entrain a flow to the ZPE field using high-frequency electromagnetic fields. With the ZPE entrained by the electric current, the current is suddenly stopped with a precise timing device. When the electron flow suddenly stops, a, quote, radiant energy event, end quote, then occurs, which releases a pulse of energy far in excess of the original current flow. The pulse is captured to some degree by a transducer that converts the radiant energy back to a usable form and presumably into the grid for wider distribution. Tom Bearden made public the announcement of a motionless electromagnetic generator, or MEG, in 2002. His patent was an oscillating magnetic field to entrain the ZPE with no moving parts. Another low energy device called a mighty engine MYT, a massive yet tiny, has been demonstrated to use only 5% of the fuel of a normal engine. Free energy inventor Adam Trombley had been invited to demonstrate one of his generators at the United Nations and to the US Senate, but these events were constrained by the first Bush administration. Then the device itself was taken in a government raid. Former Canadian Ambassador James George details these series of events in his book, The Little Green Book on Awakening. In 1982, Adam Trombley received an international patent, WO 1982 002126, for his and Joseph Kahn's co-invention of the closed path homopolar machine, a ZPE device. In 1983, Trombley was issued a gag order by the US government to stop development of the closed path homopolar machine. Then, sometime before 1989, Trombley's gag order was dropped, and he developed another zero-point energy device with David Farnsworth called the piezo ringing resonance generator in June of 1989. Trombley was scheduled to demonstrate a small version of his piezo ringing resonance generator at the UN in New York, but at the last minute, he was forced to move to a church down the street. Afterwards, Trombley gave a speech in the Dag Hammarskjöld Auditorium at the United Nations in front of an international audience. A few days later, Trombley was scheduled to demonstrate the same device at the US Senate Banking and Finance Committee in Washington, D.C. Only Senator Carl Levin and a handful of staff were in attendance because the senior Bush administration called hundreds of senators, congressional representatives, and their staff members for an off-the-cuff discussion of the Clean Air Act at the exact same time as Trombley's demonstration. Thus, the first Bush administration successfully diverted attention away from the technology in an effort to censor Trombley. Magnetic energy devices. Free energy systems generated by magnets have been independently invented by dozens of people around the world for decades. In the United States, the few people who invent free energy devices most often proceed to take out a patent. Once making their inventions known, they will sometimes be offered large sums of money for the plans, or the patent seeker may retreat from advancing the patent or simply disappear. Inventors are also handicapped by a lack of funding, greedy capital venture groups, naive investors, personal eccentricities, the vagaries and whims of the US Patent Office, and active suppression by shadowy forces. The quest to simply arouse public attention seems more difficult than actually creating the free energy device itself. Dealing with the forces of suppression is one goal, and those who are aware of the dilemma are developing effective tools to counter disinformation as awareness of the problem increases. The most commonly invented free energy device involves the natural resistance of magnets. Once the magnets are given a start, an electric engine can produce a steady energy flow, which charges a battery or produces direct electric discharge, completely independent of where it was started. Magnetic free energy is produced by an entrainment of ZPE through the use of high-frequency electromagnetic fields. When the energy is abruptly cut, the field collapses and a brief burst of energy is captured, apparently from the ZPE field. Inertia and gravity appear not to be fundamental forces, but artifacts of the interaction between matter and the ZPE field. The scientific goal is to improve the design of magnetic generators in ways that would overcome or avoid the counterforce that usually opposes movements of magnets in a generator. Over unity, in which a little energy is needed to start the device and then it produces a greater output, is the holy grail of energy research. Perhaps reading the writing on the wall, in 2005, GMC Holdings announced the Rare Earth Magnetic Amplification Tech, or REMAT, which delivers brief pulses to the rotor magnets and then cuts the pulse abruptly. The pulse from the collapsing magnetic field delivers added kick to the rotor magnets, and the cycle repeats. Precise and fast timing are part of the operation, capturing an entrained ZPE. A small amount of shared energy is necessary to start and run the motor, which then produces substantial output power during operation, even considerably more than is needed to start and operate the device. Metternich commune near Bern, Switzerland, has a free energy machine, which works on the same principles as the REMAT. It has been producing a constant power output of 230 volts at 13 amperes for a 3 kilowatt rated pulse DC daily rate for over 25 years. A PAP engine created by Joseph Papp has also been demonstrated to run without fuel. It utilizes noble gases driven only by anti-gravity, generating 500 horsepower for an engine. Joseph Papp invented and demonstrated a pulsed plasma discharge automotive style piston engine that ran on sealed charges of noble gas mixtures in the cylinders. His electric arc ignition triggered far greater output than input. The superconnecting Searle effect generator, SEG, by John Searle, is another novel magnet-based electrical generator. The SEG is given an initial application of a small amount of energy, electricity, to get it going, thereafter accelerating to operating speed on its own, and no further external power being required. It is a demand-driven device system which automatically and seamlessly responds to an increased electrical load with no spikes or transients in the power being delivered. And beyond. There is a saying that no free thinker is ahead of his or her time, but they are their time. Right now, excessive carbon emissions are melting the polar ice caps, polluting the atmosphere, and threatening the delicate balance of life on this planet. This carbon-burning energy madness, like war, needs to end on Earth if we hope to survive as a species. Certainly, we are clever enough to move past 19th century internal combustion engine technology and to see through the attitudes that treat possible free energy solutions as idle speculation to be ignored, ridiculed, or feared. The coming energy revolution will then change the world immediately. The oil-based economy will have to readjust to clean, unlimited energy for free or little cost to the people of the world. Synthetic or drilled oil can be used for plastics and chemicals, but no longer for fuel. It will become obvious that most remaining oil, natural gas, coal, and uranium reserves should stay buried. Embracing the mere possibility of a breakthrough energy solution revolution should be and will become a fundamental and overriding United Nations global mandate. But those individuals who rule the oil-based economy are also the largest banking interests and basically the current masters of the world. Before we can reach our utopia, we'll have to overcome these forces, which is no easy task.